right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're really happy to have with us Mary McDirmid. She's a special needs financial planner with the Special Abilities Network. She's in the Pacific Northwest. She's also the mom to two kids, one of whom had epilepsy surgery. And she's also an advocate for rare diseases in the Northwest Rare Coalition. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that I could say about Mary, but I'm going to leave it at that. If you want to add anything, feel free, and please go ahead.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Audrey. So glad you guys made it here today. These are first steps to find out all the information you can about financial planning for our families. And our vision is to provide every family in America entrusted with our kids the planning they deserve. That is our mission statement. We are a network of advisors. I usually have a teammate with me, but I couldn't, the calendars weren't aligned. So you get me today, and then Audrey is going to help me also be my person kind of navigating that chat. Audrey, can you hear me okay? Is this okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Awesome,
yep.
Thank you. All right, so I want to thank the Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance so much. I went to your conference in Utah this summer. I was so blessed to present, and then I was also just got to double dip and be also a parent. So I just want to thank them for having me. This is a super fun slide. I'm not a lawyer or an accountant. I'm a recovering accountant, which might be even worse, but I can't write up legal documents, and I can't do your tax returns. Now, taxes, legal stuff, all of that is included in all of our planning. So I like just to give that disclosure that I'm not either of those people that can write up those other documents. As Audrey stated, I'm a parent just like you. So in this photo, there's one person with a rare disease, which is Ruth. She's on my lap. And then there's three others that are the support crew. So Ruth was born 2016 with my stubbornness, her dad's complexion, and tumors on her heart that led to a diagnosis of tuberous sclerosis complex. Now, we all wear a lot of crowns. I'm going to say crowns now instead of hats. So I'm a caregiver, a wife, a mom, and not specifically always in that order. And then when I was pregnant with Ruth, I became a fee-based financial planner. So when I came off maternity leave and being in the NICU with Ruth, I panicked about our plan because everything that I had put in place before Ruth was in our life was now hosed, basically. And so I raised my hand, asked for help. I worked for a company that put me through training to help families like ours. And also they said, hey, I think you should help these families. Like, you care, you know it. And so since 2020, you guys are the only families I help. So I get to be a catalog of information. The more families that come in, the more I know. So I tell people I'm a map maker and a traveler. So I'm always gathering more information so that I can be a better planner for all of you. Like Audrey said, please put your questions in the chat. And then towards the end, we'll go off of record. And if you have something you want to say, then that would be awesome. Then we can figure that out. But let's put them all in the chat for this group. I start with a picture of my family as well, because it takes everybody. It takes not even just these people in this picture, it takes a lot of more people. And through this presentation, I'm going to try and make really complex, not just a rubric, but like complex situations with families, complex situations with our kids into crayon as much as possible. So I'm going to try and make this high level simple. It is very complex when you kind of get into it. So I'm going to do my best. And I use examples with my family specifically. So if you hear me say Ruth is 30 years old and she has XYZ, I'm always going to use my family as the example just to make it really safe. Okay. All right. So where do we start? I like to start with where are we now? Okay. So if you can see this stage 1, 2, 3, 4, let me know you're good. Okay. So stage 1 is diagnosis. Now, if we have anybody in the birth to 3 stage here tonight, or today, give them like a high five. Let's give all the people in stage 1 a high five, because you're in crazy emergent, having a newborn, and also having a diagnosis. So this is just a real hard time. And usually you're in the early intervention system. So birth to 3 through your state. Some state waivers start this time. and other specific things, but you are real just trying to make it through the day. So stage 1 is that. Stage 2 is all school age. So IEPs, we were blessed to have IEPs when Ruth was 3 and 4, because we were in early education when she was 3 or 4. And transition planning starts at 14, 15 for most school districts. And the big transition happens at 18. Okay, so I'm guessing you get a ton of information thrown your way about the transition planning. And the reason we think transition planning is at 18 is because that's when you have to make a legal decision on guardianship or whatever option you want. Also, SSI happens at that stage. So that is a big transition stage that we're trying to get you as ready for as possible. Yes, Audrey.
So we have a question in the chat. Can you explain what a state waiver is? Because I see that under at IEPs and waivers at age 3.
Yeah.
You have a minute to discuss that?
Sure. Yeah. So every state has a waiver system. Waivers are Medicaid services for healthcare and or other options. So each state has its own waiver system. Washington has one that has 7 waivers on it. So you go through an application process, your child gets assessed, and they'll let you know which waiver you're open for. Some states have really robust systems. Some states have no systems at all. There is a really good, I'll put in the chat, or I'll give it to Audrey to follow up with. There's a gentleman in DC who has mapped out all the waiver systems in every state in the United States. And it's awesome. So he has mapped out every waiver system, which is help for our kids before they turn 18.
And we might have that on we have something called the Almost Everything list, which is becoming a very long document. It might already be there, but if not, send it to me and I'll make sure that it is already there.
Awesome. Yep. So it's help before they turn 18. Sometimes waivers go after 18 as well, but it's a state-based help for our families, whether it's Medicaid, caregiver hours, respite hours. Sometimes it's a stipend for equipment. It can vary just depending on state to state. Okay. Stage 3. So stage 3 is after your child is transitioned. They may be in school till 21, 22. So that's why we kind of have this extra. But then we're talking about, what are they going to do after school? So are we talking community employment? What are they going to do to fill their day? And then also, as a parent, this is where the timeline shifts from the child age to the parent's age. What are we doing for our retirement? How are we planning for that? And what age are we going to start thinking about that? So stage 3 has a lot in it, just because you're thinking about what's going to fill my child's day, and when am I going to be able to retire, and what does that look like if all 3 of us we need to retire for 3. Stage 4, Liz is just the stage nobody wants to talk. I don't even want to really talk about stage 4 because I can't get sick or die, right? That's our normal default plan, but we all are going to get sick at some time, and we all are going to pass away. So like, deal breaker right there. But stage 4 is when we're in retirement. What are we going to do to set up our child to be successful? Okay, that's what I say in stage 4. Now, if you guys wouldn't mind, can you guys throw what stage you're in the group? We have about 15 participants, but what stage are you guys in? Got some stage 2s. 3, we got a stage 1, Megan Newton. Congratulations. Let's give Megan a high five, everybody. She's in stage 1. That's a big deal. Okay, that gives me a good idea. Okay, awesome. So what I want you guys to do is think of what stage you're in now, and how are medical, therapy, college, employment, housing, how are those affecting you now? And if they're not, cool. What is going to be affecting you in the next stage as well? So think, what am I have to deal with now? Where am I now? And what am I going to have to think about in the next stage? Okay. Now, all of this planning, get one thing out of this presentation today. All of the planning we do, okay, is if our kids are on benefits now, if they're on a waiver system, or they are going to be SSI eligible in the future, we need to have, there's an asset limit that they can only have, and that's $2,000. Okay, so all the planning we're doing and all this presentation is about is making sure we make sure the benefits are in place. If they are eligible, we think they will be eligible, and give them an amazing life. Okay. Now there's only a couple things that will allow us to do that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay. So $2,000 is our asset limit. Some of the stuff we go through today also is very technical, and some of it is not. Okay. So our next slide is not a technical thing. It's a vision value thing. So what I like my families to do is a family vision. This is a way to transfer values. There's multiple different ways people do this. This is just a simple way for that I found works for us. Okay. This is my family vision in December 31st of 2034. Now that sounds super ridiculous, but that's when Ruth is 18. Okay. And I have some things in place that I do with Charlie, my other daughter, every year that I want to make sure happens, that I'm spending time with her. And that's a Christmas sleepover we do. So I hope that's still happening. And transitioning Ruth to adulthood, I don't know what that's going to look like, but we have 5 values in our family that I hope that are always in place. And it's participate, advocate, listen, respect, and kindness. Okay. So those are our 5 family values, and that's how we form these family visions, right? And participate's a really hard one to describe to a 6-year-old that has a lot of stuff going on. She doesn't quite understand that right now. But in our family vision for this year, we're trying to define what participate means for Ruth. We know what participate means for Charlie because that's a concept that she understands. Okay. An example of something we had in 2021 was we wanted to start potty training for Ruth. Now, we've had goals before of accomplish potty training. That doesn't always work with our families. It was start potty training was more of a goal that was accomplishable. Okay. So I'm really into reaching goals that are having habits in place every month that reach a big goal. Okay. So one of the habits was we were going to put her on the toilet every morning. Now, I don't care what happens, but every morning we were getting up and the first thing we did, we were going to sit on the potty. Eventually that became a habit and she finally would go, right? But it took like maybe 6 months of that to actually make it happen. So this is a way for you to transfer what you were doing that year into a vision. Also, you can always relate back to it and find out what your actually goal was for that year. Okay. Guardianship. All right. So guardianship is very personal, very unique. I'm not telling you which way to go. I'm not the person to do that. But I am the person that's going to ask if you are going to go down this road, if you're kind of in that stage 2, if you're deciding, hey, yeah, guardianship is a way we need to go, cool. Then how are we going to go through that? What's the rules in your specific county? You know, if you're an outsourcer, who's the lawyer in town that can help you do that? Now, there's also least restrictive alternatives. There's a POA. There's a lot of options out there. The only reason I'm asking about this in the realm of financial planning is because if you are going to be that person, who's the next person behind you? Okay, who's your backup? And if there's not a person as a backup, are we going to have to pay a professional possibly to take that spot in the future? And if we do, what is the what is the cost associated with a professional guardianship? Yeah, Audrey.
So just to clarify that a POA is a power of attorney.
Yep.
And then I just want to back up just a little and not everyone understands why they would even need to be considering this. So
Yeah.
Some of us, our kids will get to adulthood and will feel like they're ready to just go do their thing and make their own life decisions. But a lot of us will feel like our kids either need support for the rest of their lives or maybe just for a little bit longer.
Yep.
And so really learning about and understanding your options in terms of decision making once they are legal adults, which is usually age 18, depending on your state, is really important. And to learn about that well before you get to that age. And each state has kind of different language and different tools, but it's something you should start researching and learning about pretty early. I would say by the beginning of high school, you should start to understand your
Yep.
options and thinking about what might be possible. I just want to add as an anecdote here, my son is in college and he is conserved, which is California's, it's a form of guardianship in California, primarily because of his medical decision making. He's not able to really articulate all of his medical needs or advocate for himself or explain what's going on. So we were able to get a conservatorship. And some people will say, well, my child's not disabled enough right? So I hear they're not disabled enough for X, or they're too disabled for X. So you can have a very, very, very impaired child who's in supported decision-making agreement, or a child who's what considered quote unquote high functioning that's under a conservatorship. So it's more of a family values and an individual ability and like what your priorities are. So I just wanted to throw that in there for clarification.
Yep, that's a perfect way to describe it. So I say it's a family decision and a capacity. So you got two things. What do we need as a family? And then what's the capacity of the person? That will kind of guide your decision on which way you're going to go. But yes, at 18, our child are viewed as adults. And I would love to say that this is only state specific, but it's actually county specific. So you have to go drill down all the way down to your county on what the rules are. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about the financial resources, how we're funding our children's lives, basically. So I like to into different buckets, okay? Basic government benefits, and I'm going to define that as SSI or SSDI, okay? So SSI and SSDI are amount of money just coming to your household every month, okay? We're not talking about the medical part. This is just money coming to your household, okay? Those are the basic government benefits, and they are eligible for that pre-18, but most people get it after they turn 18, okay? And it depends on how the qualifications and the definition of SSI. Family supplements. Okay, who's supplementing right now? I am. I'm supplementing by unpaid Uber driving my kids for hours probably right now. Okay, we're all supplementing in some way. We're also supplementing in when we run out of OTPT speech, right? We're all going to run out of those halfway through the year. We're supplementing in copays for crazy seizure medications. We're, whatever your family's you're supplementing, that is something that we're really going to kind of focus on, just because I always expect people to be able to do that most likely through their lifetime. But how are you going to do that when you're not around? Okay, so that is a chunk of this the financial resources list. Okay. Gifts and inheritance. This is where it gets a little lectury, so stay with me. And I'm going to use my family. So let's say my dad has $500,000, and he says, "Hey, Mary, in my estate planning, I'm actually going to skip you. You're doing great. I don't feel like you need this money, but I wanted to give it to my two grandchildren. What happens to be your two kids are the only grandchildren on my side of the family. So Ruth and Charlie are going to inherit $250,000 from my dad when he passes. Now, what's the number one problem with that for Ruth?
Too much money.
It's too much money. So it's over $2,000, right? And as much as $250,000 is in our heads, it's probably not enough to fund her whole lifetime. Okay, so thank you so much, Dad. I love you for doing that. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a vehicle, which is a special needs trust, to capture that money. So it's protected from SSI, but she can have a great life. Also, my other daughter's only 10, so I don't think she should probably inherit that just straight out when she's 18, because that seems like a recipe for disaster, as I was probably not the most responsible 18-year-old if I got $250,000. So that's how things could go sideways when we talk about gifts and inheritance to our kids. Now, you're going to see a theme in this. That's going to be all of these things down below as well. We just can't directly give money to our kids, and there are vehicles to capture them. We're going to talk about those in the next slides: special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. Okay, those are what we're going to talk about coming down. But the reason I talk about gifts and inheritance in a lectury way is because not everybody's talking to their family about what their plan is. Nobody wants to talk to their parents. You have to have a family meeting about this. If you're doing your planning, you better be talking up the line about what their planning is, so it doesn't accidentally over-resource your kids. Legal settlements, these can be structured very different ways, and these are basically if there's a malpractice. So if something happens at the hospital and there's a legal settlement coming to your kids. Also, I've seen the school system. So if the school system for some reason gets sued and there's a legal settlement coming that way, they can get paid out to our kids. Same kind of thing. We got to collect that into a vehicle that won't affect their benefits. Okay. When I talk about real estate, I'm more talking about let's say more of a not just your primary home. I'm talking about if you have rental properties, an apartment building, anything that's kind of going to spit out an income, same kind of thing. So if I have an apartment building and it spits out $500,000 every month, how am I going to make that structured so that Ruth doesn't get over-resourced? And then life insurance. Okay, the way that this works is awesome. You can make life insurance work really great for you, but not if you name out your beneficiaries in the wrong way. So when you get life insurance, and the best example I have is when you start a new job. So you start a new job, they're offering you this life insurance benefit. It's free. They're going to pay for it. It's like 1 or 2 times your salary. Awesome. Signing up on my day. I like, yeah, I want free life insurance. Yes. And then I put my spouse as the primary. Great. If I pass away, he'll get the money. And then who do I put as the secondary? And most people default their children. Same problem. That happened twice last year. I had 2 calls from people. They were family members who are taking care of kids that the kids got named out on a work benefit or the beneficiary. So the number one thing, we can't give our kids over $2,000. If you're going to take anything else after this, check your beneficiary named out vehicles, which is life insurance and any IRAs, 401ks. Those are named out beneficiaries, and we don't want to name our kids out directly. Okay. We're going to look at this one more time just because I really want to drive this home. There's also, this is the way to look at funding sources and what they can pay for. So on the left, public sources, and we include Medicaid and Medicare. This is what that pays for on the left. And our, whatever we're supplementing, private sources of funding. So what we're supplementing right now, this is what it can pay for in the future. Okay. You just want to be, just really careful with what the planning we're doing now, what are we paying for now, and how are we going to cover that in the future? The hard thing I think that most parents are dealing with, what I've seen right now, is not just medical, but dental and vision. They call those, sadly, vanity insurances. So dental and vision aren't always Medicaid covered. So you got to be like, okay, how are we going to, if your child is impacted dentally or vision, so my daughter has both, we're planning for a chunk of money to make sure that that's taken care of in the future, because that's just not something that Medicaid covers all the time. Okay. Another thing that we're really, really, really concentrated on is housing. How's housing going to look? Yeah, and just a lot of things. Whatever you're paying for now, how is that going to be supplemented in the future? Okay. All right. So, Mary, this all sounds great, but how do if I've done the planning, I kind of know the money, I know where it's coming from, I know how much we're going to have in the end. How do I create people around us to support? And this is a mix of people that support me currently, and then people that are going to support in the future when I'm not around, that are going to just support Ruth. So we're talking about 2 lifespans, basically, my life and my husband's life and our support of Ruth. And then when that's going to end, and it doesn't just end at death, it's when we're not able to care for her anymore. And then what's the next part going to be? And so you got to create a team around you that's going to be able to do that. So right now, Jay's mom is a huge support of our family. And I'm going to show you in the next slide a picture of our whole family and how we set this up. We have family members that are great supporters of ours. I have my own financial professional because I'm too close to the planning to be able to do my own plan. So I hire someone else. I have an attorney who I bounce questions off of all the time. I have a couple of them, depending on IEP, or if it's SSDI questions or just estate planning. So I have different attorneys that I refer to all the time. That's current. Now, in the future, who's going to be the future guardian if Ruth needs that? Who's going to be the trustee of her trust? Who's going to be the decision maker on the trust? I have a counselor now. She's going to need one. Also, I actually think we're going to put our older daughter into counseling pretty soon, just because she feels like she needs to talk to somebody else about the dynamic of everything that's going on with our family. I gotta edit my slides, but I think I need to put the school team in here instead of life coach. We view our school support as part of our team. I do go into IEP meetings thinking they are part of my team and have the best interest of my daughter. And then I also think that about our health professionals. Now, has that been the case all the time? No. Did we have to find health professionals that thought that we were teammates? Absolutely. So creating that team is kind of what stops people, I think, from doing this planning, because you start to run out of people that you think you can trust to take care of your kids. But I would challenge everybody to actually say, well, if I raised my hand and needed help, who would be there? And then ask them for help before you need it, right? Ask them for help before it becomes emergent. This is my team. So I like to play this out in real life. So this is a real life example of how we set up our plan. This is at our TSC walk in Seattle 4 years ago, because there's 2 footprints. That means Ruth is 2 in this picture. So our backup caregiver is Sharon. She's on the left over here, standing next to Charlie. Now, Sharon knows where my kids' medicine is. She knows the school schedule. She knows the doctors. She lives 15 minutes away from us. The girls have spent the night at her house. The girls are very comfortable with her, and she's an amazing caregiver. Now, there's something really obvious about Sharon, that she's not going to be able to be in that position for much longer. And it's because she's 74. So I love her in that position now, but she's just not going to be able to be in that position for much longer. And when I approached my family about this, I told them, hey, I have these great positions open to help our family. We're taking resumes right now. And I kind of made a joke about it, but I'm like, what do you think, what part can you play in our team so that we can get the support we need now and in the future? Yeah, Monica?
I just wanted to say that I think it's also important to have several people designated, because sometimes, let's say after you die, the person the first pick doesn't want the job. And the second pick may not want the job.
Yep.
So it's really having kind of like a chain of people who might do this.
Yes. Yep. And we're going to talk about that. I have a couple layers, but I don't have a ton of layers, but thank you, Monica, for sure. It is an optional job, right? So I tell people I was taking resumes and what job do you want, but also it's when the time comes, there should be at least 3 deep in most of the positions so that you have backups to backups to backups. Now, Sharon's backup is Melissa. She's standing in the very back right next to me, brunette. Melissa happens to be a nurse. She does live 4.5 hours away from us, so that's not the most optimal choice, but she's willing to, she raised her hand and said, I think I can be a caregiver for your girls. I'll be the backup to Sharon, and I'll be the future number 1. The thing that's great is her 2 boys that are standing in front of us are all actually aging out. They're almost 18 and 16 right now. So she's going to be an empty nester. So that actually works in our benefit, that she would be able to come take care of the girls temporarily at our house. They would figure out housing later, like all that thing. But she would be able to, on a dime, fly over and be with our girls if something happened to us. Now, to Monica's point, Melissa and I are the same age. Exactly the same age. So that next row of, you want to think backups, and then generationally, how is that going to work? So we got Sharon right now, Melissa's our future, but we're the same age. Who's the next behind? We don't have that next generation behind quite yet. We have someone that's exactly Melissa's age as a 3rd backup, but we're waiting for people to kind of get older so that we can have the next generation behind that would be closer almost to Ruth's age, or a couple, 10 years older than her, that could take that 3rd position. Okay, and that's just on the caregiving side. Okay, so I like to separate caregiving with financial. So on the financial side, we have Molly. So behind my husband Jay and Ruth that are in the front is his sister Molly. Now Molly lives in Seattle, no kids, double income, and she she's super smart. She graduated with a math degree, and she makes decisions real quick and very precise. So Molly is our trustee. So she is our trustee on our trust, along with a professional trustee with the trust company that we've named out. She's the money person. So she's going to decide, what is in the trust documents? Is this the best interest of Ruth? Does it follow all the rules, grant, whatever requests that Sharon or Melissa would make? So I do encourage people to separate caregiving and maybe money management, just because those are, to me, what I've seen, two different types of people. I don't have everybody else on here that's in our estate, but that is like the picture kind of our support that we have in place right now. Any other questions before I go on real quick in the chat? I'm not monitoring that. Okay.
No questions in the chat, but I'd like to just add something if it's okay.
Yeah.
So when we started creating, my son's 19 now, so we've been working on this for the past 5 or 6 years. It's a long process. I mentioned in the chat that you can create a letter of intent that's totally free. You don't need an attorney. You can just start writing it. It's a Google Doc. And basically some of the things you just talked about might be things that go in the letter of intent, like where is the medicine kept? Where are your legal documents in the house? What is the school schedule? The list of the providers the child sees? Like basically, like if you go on a cruise and you don't come back, what would someone need to do to pick up and run your family's life, right? And it's kind of daunting. There's a comment about how daunting this is, and I totally feel that as well. And our attorney who helped us create our special needs trust advised me to just take one step at a time. So I literally spent maybe 15 minutes a week working on our letter of intent, but it took me a few years to finish it. And then around his 18th birthday, I kind of had my feet to the fire and got a little more serious about it. I don't know why 18 matters, because if I had died sooner, it still would have been an issue. But for some reason, for me, that mattered. So I would just say that's something to think about. The other thing I wanted to add is that not everybody on the team needs to do every role. So I reached out to a very close family friend and asked her, and she's like, well, I don't feel comfortable. Like, I don't want to be the caregiver and I don't have the financial means, but I want to be involved somehow. Can I just be someone who provides love and friendship? So we actually have a role. She's in our letter of intent saying Auntie Beth will provide love and friendship to our son for the rest of his life, as long as she's alive, right? And that is something he will need. So it's sometimes I think we think about like these kind of key areas, but there are other things to think about as well.
Absolutely. And the letter of intent, like Audrey was saying, it's an important piece, but it's not legally binding. It's not, it doesn't have your financial picture in there. It's just literally a place to store everything else, which we all know. If you have the binder or the drawer or whatever you store all the stuff in, because we all have one. I definitely have a drawer that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna just put this in there. This is something that I got from Ruth, that this goes in the drawer of doom, right? Like, yeah. It's a place to collect all that.
What changed for me though, when I did this, was that then I actually started sharing it with other people. So I had been writing it and not sharing it with other people. And then I realized I had to have conversations with those people before I could say, hey, you're in our letter of intent. And then I started thinking about that next generation planning, like you were talking about, and reaching out to some younger cousins, younger than us, but older than our kids, and saying, hey, would you want to be involved in some way on our son's trust advisory committee, is what we call it. So it's not like any one person has all the role, but there's going to be a group of people that will decide how to support my son well into adulthood. So someone in the chat put, you can just scan your documents to a Google Drive or a turbo scan. I use Google Drive and Google Docs. There's a way to password protect your Google Docs so that you feel safer about information you might be sharing with other people.
Yep. And on both of those notes, the next one is cruel that I had these people, but how am I going to tell them? Right. To Audrey's point, if I don't have a family meeting, have this organized in a way that I feel is actually like in a wagon rather than my drawer of doom. I want to have it organized before I hand things off to people, or at least say, hey, this is the work I've done. This is the work that we're going to do in the next 10 years, as long as I'm still in this world. But at least we have the basics down and you are part of it. And where this all kind of came from, to get to Audrey's point, is my lawyer actually sent out letters to everyone we named. And she's like, this feels like I'm going to do it. You should probably call them before this letter shows up at their house. And I was like, oh, okay. So it forced me to have this family meeting. A lot of people skip this. A lot of people, these are not like the most comfortable conversations. I've sat in these with my clients because some people just feel like the worst thing you can feel, and I don't want you to feel this today, is shame. I haven't done XYZ. I hear that maybe at the start of every meeting I have with a client. I can't believe I haven't done this. I don't allow that. I won't allow you to shame yourself into saying I haven't done. Think of all the things you have done. Like, you've done a ton of things to this point. This is just another step that we're going to have to go through, and we do have to get it done. But like, please don't feel shame about, nobody comes to me is like, I got everything done, I'm cool. Like, can you just like give it a once over? No, everybody comes with an emotion of shame, and I just can't allow that anymore. So just know, nobody comes in feeling they've gotten everything together. Now, I do not allow, once we are engaged, you to skip a family meeting, just like the lawyer wouldn't allow me to not call the people before the letter came. This is an important piece. And I can sit on these meetings with you if you need that support, and I can be your advocate of all the things you've done. Okay. But we got to do some of the organization before we're going to bring other people into your picture. Okay. Audrey, you're off mute. I just want to make sure you don't have any questions.
I do not.
Okay. Legal structure. Okay. What does it do? It's pretty simple to me. It does all the lifetime guidance. It coordinates the actions of the government services. So just like Audrey said in early, like, I think we were off, but she said, we're having conversations now with other people in our group that says, hey, these government benefits are really important to our life. So these are kind of the rules, right? Now that should be in your legal structure, but it's still important to have a conversation with. So we do that every year with Molly. I'm like, hey, Molly, remember, like, Ruth can only have $2,000 if like something happens and you need to give her money, like she's going to have to spend it in that same month, right? We got to make sure we're following all the rules that SSI gives us. And she's like, oh yeah. Like, we just have a refresher conversation. It does require, I think, to Audrey's point, it requires support. I don't think it always has to be family support. And it also implements everything that you have. Now, if you don't have a plan, the state you live in will apply a plan to you, okay? And if you don't have a will, the default is heirs. If I pass away and my husband passes away, all our assets go to our heirs. If there's no heirs, parents. If there's no parents, siblings. If there's no siblings, they'll find next of kin. Same problem. We can't just have our kids inherit straight out, okay? Now, comprehensive plan includes all these things. So primary care, what are the issues now? Where's your will and trust? What's your letter of intent? To get to Audrey's point, what is in that letter of intent? What government benefits are they on? Do they have guardians and trustees? Excuse me. Do I have life insurance in place? What are the beneficiaries? And do I have actually a long-term LTC? I should make sure that's like less acronyms, but long-term care solution. So I'm a perfect sandwich kid. So my dad had Parkinson's, and Ruth was born in a 6-month span when my dad passed. So I was a caregiver for my dad, and then Ruth was in my life. So I refuse to think that my husband would be able to take care of me if I go into a long-term care problem and Ruth at the same time. That's not not fair, but that's not a scenario I would like my family to be in. Also, if long-term care solutions happen, you're either going to pay for it out of your estate, or you're going to pay for it with insurance. And a lot of our families are trying to preserve as much as their estate to pass on to the next generation, which is your child. Okay. Now, what does a will do? So, I mean, you can read the slide, but I will tell you, to the person that said this seems overwhelming, I was in your spot. I procrastinated getting my will done. So I had done the draft. We were in the middle of reviewing the draft. I felt overwhelmed and I couldn't get it past the finish line. I finally bumped into my lawyer at an event and she goes, hey, what do I have to do to get you in? Like, I don't like leaving these estates out there that long in a draft mode because you're just unprotected. I was like, I don't know. I just don't understand everything. And it seems really overwhelming. And I don't feel like I have enough people to put in all the spots. And she's like, well, I need you to actually concentrate this on. She goes, also, is there anybody you need to exclude? And I was like, oh, yes. Actually, I have a family member, a very close family member who, I mean, I love them. They just have a mental illness and they would want to swoop in and come in and be the hero with the cape, but they wouldn't have the capabilities. So I think you also have to think of, is there anybody in your life that you actually don't want to be a part of it? And you can exclude people in these documents as well. And then also you can make a springable trust inside of a will. So it doesn't have to be created now if you're not funding it. And we're going to go into trusts and able accounts at this point. Okay. So let's just do a really quick recap. Okay. The amount of money our kids can have as an asset is $2,000. Okay. 2 places we can put monies to build an amazing life for them for all the things we're supplementing are a special needs trust and an able account. Okay, we're going to talk about those next. The second tier of things that I want you to think about is make sure my beneficiaries are named out correctly. Okay, so a trust. Man, there's some big misnomers out there about trusts. Like, I have to be a billionaire. I don't have any money. I don't have anything to, what am I going to have to put into a trust? Okay. Most trusts get funded after we're not around. If you have something to put into it now, it can be created, right? But a lot of trusts get funded when both parents pass. Okay. It coordinates all your resources. So it helps ensure that continuation of government benefits, provides that supplemental needs. It can direct final distribution. So if you do, there's 3 types of trusts out there. If you do a third party, which means all of their people can put money into the trust, then that can be passed down to other kids. So it can be passed down to other people in your family. Now, funding methods, you can put a lump sum in, you can start gifting into it, you can do annual payments, you can name out your life insurance to the trust. And there are able account options. Okay, so you can go from a trust to an able. You can't go the other way. Okay, so I view a trust with the clients I deal with as a savings. Okay, it's where we put larger sums of money. Okay, so life insurance, IRA named out, property possibly depending on the trust, but trusts are a place to put larger sums of money. Okay, savings. Okay, now we're going to talk about able accounts. Okay, so able accounts were primarily meant for working persons with disabilities who are receiving Medicaid services, and they are based off of 529 accounts, which are college funding accounts. But an able account are made for our families so we can use them for way more things than just college funding. Okay, so if you have a 529 out there, there are options to move it to an able. But an able account is based off of a working person with disabilities. Now, that's not the only people that can have one, but that's what it was modeled after. Here are the characteristics of an able. Okay, we have that $2,000. So it's a place for, do you want me to answer your question? You want me to go through this?
Let's pause, sorry, because it's a good one. What if the grandparents have already set up and are contributing to a 529 account?
Grandparents have?
Grandparents have set up a 529 for the child. So that's now going to be a countable asset when you apply for federal benefits.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Like, how old's the child? Like, there's a couple things we can go down.
7 or 8 years old.
Okay, yeah. So you can we can roll funds from a 529 into an able. Now there are limits, and I need to update my slide. So there's limits of how much you can put into an able. So let's say there's $100,000 in this 529.
Mm-hmm.
You can only put 17K into an able, and so it'll take years to roll that into an able for their benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah.
But I would say you want to maybe not contribute to that anymore. It also depends on the child. Is the child going to be able to go to college? I mean, you can still use an able for education, so it seems like a good idea to kind of flip that switch and start putting that into an able. I don't know. There's other options for grandparents, but that's a hard one. Also, are there other kids in the family that could use the education, and then we could start funding an able in a different way, and then the other family members could use the 529. It gets a little, it's very personal, but there are options, I'd say.
Yeah, so Monica's saying the 529 is not countable if the child goes to college, but that's the if, and I'm not sure if what you mean by not countable tax-wise, or if you mean it wouldn't count against an application towards federal benefits. Monica, do you want to clarify?
The latter.
Okay, so it would not impact access to federal benefits if you have a 529.
It shouldn't. I agree with Monica. It shouldn't.
Okay.
I had a call recently from someone in Washington who Washington was rejecting that a 529 wasn't their asset. So then you have to go to the Palms and get all this documentation to show them that they're actually a beneficiary of an account that's actually another person so you might have to fight. Just know that there's,
Yeah. Someone asked about if there's a benefit to having both. I think the answer is yes, and I'll let you answer that question as you go through. And then someone else asked, for the 529, who's the owner? You can transfer the 529 to other family members. And one thing we've done in our family is we have, my younger son has a 529, which we could potentially pull out and use money from that for our older son if we wanted to. And then, but then there's also the ABLE account. We can use that to pay for college expenses as well. So you could have both. Again, I think I would want to talk to someone who really knows this well. Monica just shared a link about, Nicole, you're asking about the benefit of having both a 529 and an ABLE. I don't think there's a benefit to having both a 529 and an ABLE, but I think having an ABLE and a special needs trust, I do think there is a benefit, but I'm going to let you talk, Mary, and I'm going to stop talking.
No, it's great. No, these are great. So I guess let's address those in chunks. So a 529 and an ABLE, the advantage would be if you have other kiddos that can benefit from a 529, right? If you have other kids in your family, you have we have 2 girls in my family, right? So if Charlie, we're funding a 529 right now, or we were funding it for both of them, and then Charlie can use that, or she's going to become a doctor or whatever. We have no idea. So we're funding a 529 for her. Now, Ruth, also she's 6. Do I know if she's going to go to school? No. So should I open an ABLE? Now, there are a couple things to talk about that, and we'll get there, but you should have provisions in your will for a special needs trust to capture large amounts of money. And you should have an ABLE for the leverage of a first party being able to put money into that in the future. Also, an ABLE has a $17,000 contribution limit. It can't actually accept large sums of money. It can't accept $100,000 of a life insurance benefit. It can't accept those things. So we need both. Okay, just on a pure funding scenario. So let's go through these, and then I'm going to talk about a scenario of how you would use this. Okay. It does provide autonomy for the person. So we're talking about kids that are over 18, wanting some freedom, wanting to use a prepaid card to spend things on, right? So it comes with, depending on your state, right? You have to check out your state ABLE account. But prepaid cards are pretty awesome because you can put $50 on there. They're going to go buy groceries. They're going to go buy whatever, and they can't get overdrafted. The tax advantages are just like a 529. Now, this is a pretty big point. Contributions are subject to Medicaid payback, depending on your state, but most states have a Medicaid payback. So why is that important? Let's play out a scenario. Let's say Ruth is 25. She's working at Mod Pizza. Okay, she loves Mod Pizza. She gets $2,000 a month in wages from Mod Pizza. Okay. She gets $1,000 a month in Social Security. And I'm just using round numbers because my brain works like that. So she gets $3,000 into her household every month. Okay. That's over $1,000 over our limit, right? So she's getting $3,000. Now she pays us a room and board stipend of $500 because she lives in our house. So she has $2,500 left, and she hasn't spent it down on anything else. She can take $500 of that and put it into her ABLE. Okay, now she's $2,000, which is the limit. So SSI stays the same, and she has $500 in her ABLE. Okay, let's pretend she does that for 30 years, right? So 500 times 12 times 30. That's $180,000, which is a lot of money. Now, let's say Ruth tragically passes away. Okay. She has any liability, personal liabilities out there, the ABLE will pay the liability first, and it'll pay for a burial. Okay. After that, Medicaid is going to say, hey, you've been on Medicaid since she was 3. We're going to pull back all of the Medicaid that you've used in your lifetime. Okay. Now, these are the vehicles we have to deal with. And ABLE is any first party vehicle we have is always going to be a Medicaid payback. So that's why we use this as a checking as much as we can in ABLE. And we use a special needs trust as a savings for large monies as well. Okay. Okay, if you're on SSI, it goes above 100. So that same scenario, let's say Ruth had $180,000 in her account, her SSI would be terminated. So that monthly stipend that we're getting from the government would be cut off, but her Medicaid stays in effect. This is very important, right? A lot of the families I deal with, yes, SSI is important because it's $921 right now, but Medicaid is really important for us. Like we've had brain surgery. Most people on here have, what was that, $2 million probably, like that we can't pay out of pocket. So like our Medicaid bill is going to be very large. So we want to make sure we're leveraging the vehicles we have in the best way possible. Audrey?
Yeah, there was a question about, could you, in your scenario, can Ruth place the extra $500 in her trust? So can you talk a little bit about the individual with a disability?
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
money in their own trust and how and why that would be beneficial or not?
Yep. So there are different types of trusts out there. And so when I'm talking about special needs trust, I'm specifically referring to a third party special needs trust. Okay. And third party special needs trust means everybody but Ruth can put money into it. Okay. The minute you make that a first party where it's her monies, it's going to be Medicaid payback no matter what. Okay. All first party vehicles out there, Medicaid payback vehicles. Okay. So I want to separate those two. So I always want a third party vehicle where she can't put monies inside of it, not her own monies, because then that third party trust will then be able to pass down to Charlie in the future if there's monies left inside of it. Okay. ABLE is the only vehicle out there that our families have access to that everyone can put money into, including Ruth. Okay. Does that make sense why those are different, Audrey? Is that
It does to me.
clear as mud? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the distributions. Now, this is the one thing I actually really like about anything that has to do with our families and the restrictions that we're talking about and all these hoops we're jumping through. Now, they made the definition very loose of the benefit of the person. Okay. And there is a list of things that they can use, but like, basically, if you can justify this benefits their life to be better, we can do a distribution out of an ABLE account. Okay. Education, housing, transportation, employment, assistive technology, health, wellness, financial management, and legal fees. Like there's a lot of things we can pay for out of an ABLE. That was the one thing that is awesome that came out of this, is that the definition of for the betterment of their life is very broad. Okay. Must be eligible. So eligibility requirements is a disability before the age of 26. Now there has been a change to that, luckily, in the legislature, but it doesn't go take into effect till 2026, which is way further down the line. So if you have a kiddo that doesn't have a diagnosis before 26 right now, we have to wait a couple of years, and then we would be able to open an ABLE account. So diagnosis before the age of 26. If you're on SSI or SSDI, you are automatically eligible. If not, you would just need the letter of diagnosis from your licensed physician. You just have that on record. 1 account per person. These rules all exist because somebody tried to open 2 at one time. So, all right, we can only have $2,000. Ruth can only have $2,000 in her account. If she goes over that, she is able to put the excess into an ABLE account. And I use a third-party special needs trust to put everything that is going to come from my estate for her benefit into that bucket, checking and a savings. Okay. We want both for that leverage. Okay. Other thing to do is make sure our beneficiaries aren't named out. So let's do out another scenario. Let's say I have my life insurance and my husband is the primary. I have $500,000 term and I passed away yesterday, tragically. Now that $500,000 would go to my husband if he was still living. If he's not still living, that $500,000 gets split between our kids. And if Ruth is named out as just the named out beneficiary and it's not into a trust, she will have to open a first party trust to put that in to protect her benefits, and that will be a Medicaid payback provision. Okay, so that's the reason. And I get other questions like, well, why don't I just name it out to my other kids? Why don't I disinherit her? That's really hard. Like, I want those funds to always be for the benefit of Ruth. I love my 8-year-old Charlie is so amazing. She loves her sister a lot, but what if she marries someone awful? Like, there's some scenarios that could go down the pipe when she's an adult that I want to make sure Ruth's monies are designated to her specifically. And no matter who's in her sphere of influence, those will always be protected and they will always be going for her benefit. Okay. I have a question slide coming up, but I have a feeling we could go through some questions, Audrey, if you have some.
Where there's one more question and we're also almost out of time. Unfortunately, I know this went so fast.
Yep.
The question was, is the 529 subject to the Medicaid payback?
529s are not Medicaid payback provision vehicles.
Yeah. But the problem is, like you explained earlier, if you put too much money in the 529, you can't necessarily roll it all over into the ABLE because there's annual limits.
And you can only use a 529 for education.
Yeah. So you could roll it into the ABLE to use it for education, but you couldn't roll it into the ABLE to use it for anything else. The 529.
Wait, say that again.
Because I thought you could roll the 529.
You can roll a 529 into an ABLE and then you get to use it for the other things, but there is a Medicaid payback provision.
Okay. If you're in certain states, because some states have eliminated.
Some states are, but most of the states that eliminate it don't allow out-of-state people to participate either.
Exactly. So it depends. You have to check your state.
Yep.
I think Monica had a question or a comment. Do you want to go ahead now, Monica?
I do, just before we close out.
Yeah.
I know all of this is very overwhelming to everybody. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm a lawyer. I was for 15 years before my son was born. I find this all very overwhelming as well. So your feelings are not unique. It is overwhelming because it's overwhelming. I don't know a better way to say it. I do want to encourage everyone, though, to at least step back and write a letter of intent or record a video of what you want, where your child's medications are. Try to upload to to a Google Drive or something like that, at least a breakdown of who the surgeons are, what medications they have, what your dreams and goals are for your child, and designate a person in your place who's familiar with your child or with the landscape that you're advocating in medically or educationally. Try to do this right away. And I don't want to be morbid, but you could die tomorrow. And we just had a family in Australia, a hemispherectomy family, where the mother started to get carried out in a rip current, and the father dived in to help her, and they both drowned. And they left behind a 5-year-old, typically developing child, and then their child with very significant support needs who'd had a hemispherectomy. And I know this sounds terrible, but it can happen. And so we have a binder in our house. The babysitters call it the death binder. And I tell all of them, if we don't come back from dinner tonight, if we both get hit by a car and something terrible happens, here's all the information. Here's who you call. My sister-in-law has the info. My brother has the info. They all have access to a Google Drive and generally have an idea of what we need. Just start there, because again, the worst case scenario, I know it sounds awful, but it could happen, and you don't want your child, to be left without any guidance and any supports.
Yep. Yeah, I don't like talking about people passing away all the time either. That's why I use all of our family, but it does happen. I get, like I said, I had 2 calls last year of people that definitely happened to. So it's not the most uplifting part about this, but it's the part that we all push down, like just shove that down and not think about it. These are questions I get all the time. I know we're out of time. I always want to tell us this is our process. So even what Monica said, like assess where you are now. Okay, what am I doing now? Like she said, I did a recording, to be really honest, really early, because writing stuff down just felt overwhelming. So I just did a recording. Another exercise we do with our families is write down, if you're married and you have a spouse, write down what you do for your family and have them write down what they do for their family, and then cross-check yourselves. Do you actually know what your spouse is doing that you don't know about? And me and my husband did this and it was painful, to be honest. Where are you now? Get organized with everything you have and then figure out what your plan is. What do you want for your family? What are you going to do? So coming here today is the first step. You guys did a great job coming here and trying to find out this information. So be really proud of yourself. I'm really honest when I say I don't want any shame in any of this stuff. We do so much for our kids. And I know this is a lot, but like, I just really want everybody to be proud of themselves. Okay. This is my info. I always offer everything at the end. This is me. So I'm more than willing to share all this information. You guys are my people. This group is very important to my heart because I am part of this group. And you're not alone. You have Monica, you have Audrey, you have me, you have resources to help you. So please reach out, raise your hand if you need help. And we would love to at least be part of that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I did put in the chat the link for our next session with you, which will be on April 4th, which is going to be all about ABLE accounts. A reminder that this session and all of our power hours are shared to our YouTube channel. We try to get them up within a few weeks of the event, so be patient with us. And you can subscribe to our channel and you'll be notified whenever something is posted. And then I'm hoping, Mary, that you can share your slides with me and I will share the slides and all the resources we discussed and the recording with you after today's session. Thank you all for being here. And thank you so much, Mary. A huge round of applause for you. We really appreciate you. I'm going to stop the recording now.